Hello and welcome back to Light the Fuse, the only weekly podcast dedicated to the Mission Impossible franchise. Once again, this is Drew Taylor, joined by Charles Hood.
Hello.
And we are so excited to bring you guys the first part of our interview with Eddie Hamilton, editor extraordinaire, who cut both Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Today, we have a very special guest, the one, the only Eddie Hamilton. Eddie, how are you?
It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for inviting me on your show. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I think my first question is, why did you come back? Knowing how they put these movies together and how much work is involved, what made you sign on again?
Well, Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise are excellent collaborators. So filmmaking is an entirely collaborative process, and it's one of the best things about the process is there's all these different talented people who come together to create a movie. And when you work with really nice, creative, collaborative people, it makes the work a pleasure. It's very, very hard work, and you know, there are lots of emotional highs and lows. It's a true roller coaster working on a mission movie. But Chris manages the chaos, and Tom is a committee of one person who's in charge of making the film,
Right.
which means that he has final cut. He delegates that pretty much to Chris McQuarrie, and so we are this little small unit of people who are making this gigantic movie, and we don't really get much outside input, really. It's just we're in the boat together, and we're making the film. And in post-production, Chris is exceptionally good at editing as well. You know, I would be out of a job if he knew how to use an Avid. You know, seriously, he writes the movies and he directs the movies, but then he edits the movies with me, and he is not at all precious about anything he's written. He understands that he's making mass entertainment. He wants to make the film play and work for as many human beings on the planet as possible, and nothing gets in the way of that end result. You know, he listens very carefully to the audience feedback that we get from our various test screenings, and he reacts to it, and Tom reacts to it, and we discuss what we're going to do, and then we do it. And so when you work with very, very nice people, it's a pleasure to come back and collaborate with them again. You know, life is short,
Right.
and you want to work on projects that, you know, have a chance of being timeless, which is obviously the holy grail when you're working in movies. You know, I would love to do a film like, you know, JFK or Aliens or Back to the Future, or, you know, going back in time, Bonnie and Clyde, which I think is a masterpiece. You know, things like that, where people are still watching the movies in the decades after. Mm-hmm. And it's really an honor to be part of the team to do that. And so when you've had a great experience, even though it was a huge challenge, don't get me wrong, there were days on Rogue Nation where I was looking at the challenges presented to us and thinking, I cannot see a way out of this, you know. But Chris was always very calm in the eye of the storm and would say, no, I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We'll get there. And we would just slowly chip away at it and improve it, and then, you know, remove scenes that didn't work and improve scenes that remained in the film. And slowly we found it. And when you're working with a director, you know what it's like. You guys are filmmakers. You're collaborating very closely for months. You know, and it's just the two of you, really. And a lot of the time with Chris, I would actually go to his apartment in London. He has a beautiful apartment near Hyde Park in central London, and with a beautiful view. It's a wonderfully creative space, you know. There's a lot of fresh air and an amazing place to kind of gaze out of while you're thinking about how to solve the creative problems and the challenges in the movie. And we just sit, you know, on an iMac. He would sit next to me. We'd have two, you know, LG 21:9 displays, and I would just sit working, and he would kind of, we'd just sit and chat and drink tea and, you know, work on the movie. And especially, which probably one of your questions will be about the 12-week hiatus when Tom broke his ankle.
Yes, but that is one of our questions.
One of the greatest, one of the great opportunities which came out of that. And Chris, as you know, he says disaster is an opportunity to excel, and you have to have that mindset when disaster really does hit like that. And he looked at it and he said, no, this will be somehow a blessing. And actually the blessing was that we got to pretty much fine cut everything that had been filmed up to that point, which was around 2/3 of the movie, and spend a lot of time with Tom and Jake Myers, the producer, and Tommy Gormley, the first AD. We would sit and we would read through the script and we would discuss how we were going to solve the story issues that were presented to us when we reviewed, the assembly. And in a perfect world, every movie would stop filming 2/3 of the way through and edit everything, right, and then pick up and film everything that's left. And of course, on every movie, you do have pickups, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. And I read somewhere that on the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson would film for 3 months for each additional movie. They'd figure out what they needed, and then they'd go and film for 12 weeks to fill all the little bits of holes and make everything work. So it was that really that allowed us. And we used to sit in his apartment and work on the film, and every dinner guest or anyone who came round, he'd be like, here, let me show you this, and he wanted feedback immediately from the audience. So anyone who came to any dinner guest or any friend who came round, he would show them the scene that we were working on and ask for feedback immediately. He says, I want the cold water thrown in my face as soon as possible, because audiences around the world are brutal, and I want brutal, honest opinions from people who haven't necessarily seen any of the other movies. I just want them to watch this scene, right, and tell me how they react emotionally to this scene. Yeah, so he's very keen to get feedback as soon as possible on every scene, even if it's just a 2-minute scene. He'll show them. I remember the scene that we worked on. The opening of Fallout was the very hardest thing to get right. Everything up until the fuse is lit, up until the end of the Delbrook Hospital scene when he goes, what's done is done when we say it's done, and he injects the dude in the neck, which always felt to be like a great place to kick off the opening titles, because you've been on this incredibly downbeat journey, and they've just had a little win, when Benji pulls the mask off, and you're just enjoying that moment. And they have this phrase where they know that the audience enjoys seeing villains feel the burn. So you wouldn't necessarily show the villain kind of going, did none of that happen? And you just want the audience you want it to be clear to the audience that actually no, they just manufactured that whole news report, and that none of the bombs have gone off, and that everything's fine. But Tom is aware that audiences really like seeing villains feel the burn. That's what he says. And so he likes to have a moment to enjoy that, which is what that is at the end when he says, what's done is done when we say it's done, and then we can kick off into the high energy opening titles. But that sort of 20 minutes, I think it is nearly 20 minutes, or even it might be 18 in the final version, I can't remember, but it was 23 minutes at one point, and we were struggling to find other movies that had the opening titles that late into the movie.
The Departed.
I think it was The Departed, and then also I think Avengers and Spectre were both 12 minutes, and I thought 12 is still quite a long time, but we knew, even when Chris first pitched me the idea of the opening of the film, I felt like once we'd really worked at it and got the pace right, it would work. The idea of starting with this dream and then having this incredibly detailed mission briefing, which is every word of it is necessary for everything else to make sense in the movie. And
we were going to ask about that.
We rewrote it 50 times, and every single piece of information you do need, because it all pays off later. It's set up in order to make stuff pay off later. And we tried so many different iterations of the mission briefing, so many different voices and so many different ways of scoring it, and so many different ways to and I know it's a lot. I know it's a huge amount of exposition. We know it's a massive information dump, but everything is necessary, and it's like eating your vegetables. You know, you need to get all that information into the audience's consciousness, whether they remember it all or not. They won't remember the details of the smallpox outbreak, right. But then later on, when Tom is driving to Kashmir, 2 hours later, and he says smallpox. You know, you'll go, oh yeah, there was something about smallpox, and so that's how they got Julia out there, and you know, so that was a very big challenge. And then going into the scene in Berlin, again, just choosing ways to kind of compress the story so that you still felt the emotion of, you know, losing the plutonium. Then going into the scene with Delbruck in the hospital room, which again was 3 minutes longer. It was like a 12-minute scene, and we managed to get it down to 9 minutes, and then we got it down to 8 minutes, and then I think we got it down to like 6.5 minutes, I think. But it was just, again, it was like just compressing it, but still trying to make all the emotion and the intensity of that moment land. But that was the challenge. But but when Chris pitched me that idea, I remember thinking, no, this is going to work, but it is going to be very difficult to get it to work. And it will require a lot of refinement, but I always had faith that faith in the process that we would eventually get there. And this idea that Chris had of showing Ethan's worst nightmare realized, you know, with the bombs going off and seeing the news report and seeing Wolf Blitzer would be a really clever way of opening the movie, you know. And you get a great mask gag that no one sees coming. What's interesting in the hospital is everyone senses that something's up, because usually the you know, the IMF team have some kind of plan of what they're doing, and a lot of people start to click when Tom gets a bit angry and starts kind of like losing his cool, when Ethan loses his cool. And you know, the number of audiences we've shown it to, we've been very sensitive of when the penny drops that something's up in that scene. You guys tell me, what did you
Well,
think?
we had been watching the 60s show that week, I think, for the podcast. So I was like, I wonder if this is like an elaborate
this it's the most. I love that scene so much because it's so much like straight out of the old show.
It is.
To me, when I was watching it the first time, I was watching it and I was like, this is going really dark, really fast.
Yeah.
And I was like, I heard this movie's really dark. This is really dark.
Yeah.
So I was like, I feel like this is going too dark. I hope this is some kind of Mission Impossible scam.
Yes.
But I'm going to go with it and see how it goes. And then once it did become like an IMF scam, I was like cheering. I was so excited.
Yeah, no, it is great.
I mean, once he says go and the walls
I know,
drop,
you're like yes! Yes! And you hear the tickle of the theme come in, kind of bum, bum.
Yeah.
And you know that you're just going to bum, bum, bum. And you're just like, we're going to tickle you, we're going to tickle you, we're going to tickle you. You know, that's how it is.
The little reference to the first movie, or I don't know if it was intentional or not, but they're like, did we get it?
Did we get it? Yeah, absolutely. All of that is absolutely deliberate. You know, a lot of thought goes into that stuff.
Yeah.
Of course we got it. And then, you know, and then nobody sees, well, nobody that I've watched the film with predicts that there's anyone other than Wolf Blitzer there. When you pull the mask off, it's like, and for all the fans out there as well, Benji gets to wear a mask, right? So for everyone who's been like tuning into Benji's mask story, and in Rogue Nation he got to wear a mask, but it was only in a flash forward dream sequence, and then he was discovered, you know, and so we were wondering whether we should play it like, you know, when Simon pulls the mask off, he's like, I gotta wear it, you know. But you know, it felt like for the fans, people would pick up on it, and it was a bit incongruous to have him go, "Guys, I wore a mask," you know. Hey.
It just added more joy to the
exactly,
moment.
Exactly.
And it's been
so excited. I was.
And it's been 3 years, so he probably wore a mask in those 3 years.
Exactly. You know.
But I remember seeing that. I mean, I think between the two of us, we've seen this movie theatrically probably more than anyone else. But I remember seeing it in the theater like 6 weeks later, and that moment still got huge like audience response.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was really amazing how well this movie did play to the audience.
Yeah, no, it was. I can't tell you how much work and love and blood and sweat goes into every frame of the film. I mean, literally every second of the movie we work on 100 times to refine it and try and make all those moments land, and we listen so carefully to the audience responses in the test screening. And if you need more time for a gag, then you add like 12 frames or 18 frames just for the laughter, so that there's enough for it to die down before the next piece of dialogue comes up. So it's enormously gratifying to hear that response from you guys, because we are so focused on delivering that to you, and we're so passionate about knowing what it means to fans. I'm a fan. I can tell you all the movie theaters where I saw the missions over the years. I was in Odeon Leicester Square in London for the first one, and then I was in the Empire Leicester Square for the second one, and then I was in the Cinerama Dome in LA for Mission 3, then I was in the BFI IMAX for Mission 4 when it came out. Saw the 70mm print I saw them all in opening weekend, and then to get a call to be a part of Rogue Nation was very daunting, because you do feel the weight. It's very exciting, enormously exciting, but you feel the weight of expectation, and you're so passionate about not letting people down, and you desperately don't want to. You don't want to be the guy who dropped the ball, when there's such a great streak. So I'm thrilled to hear you guys say that, and I'm glad you enjoyed the movie, because it really makes all the incredibly painstaking work worthwhile.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the title sequences, how this all builds into the title sequence. We wanted to ask you about, obviously the title sequence is something that's a tradition from the old show.
For sure.
Each episode had its own specific title sequence.
Yeah.
It's really awesome, very edited moments. So I wanted to hear you talk about the title sequences for each movie and the different approach for each one.
As a fan, right, I'm excited when I see a Mission Impossible movie, because I'm like, what are they going to do with the theme? That's what I want to hear, is like, what are they doing with the theme, and what are they doing with the opening titles? Because it's always so cool. Kyle's opening titles for the first one were just awesome. Yeah. Completely awesome. And they still are awesome, even though the technology within them feels sort of slightly old school. There's the energy of it and the excitement of it is still so alive. We would go back and watch it. I have all the other movies in the Avid Media Composer, so I could call them up and refer to bits at a moment's notice, and we would often go back and watch it just for fun, just to give myself a kind of kick up the bum to re-energize myself. And I really liked 3. I remember when I saw 3 at the Cinerama Dome, there were so many incredible moments that stuck with me. The opening of 3 is the best opening, I think, of any of them. The best villain, and also you have got really extraordinarily memorable, trying to restart, in the helicopter when they're flying through the wind farm and they're trying to save Kerry Russell, and then this thing that happens with her eye when the charge goes off in her head, you're like, and that image really stuck with me. And then the breaking into the Vatican. I remember in the Cinerama Dome watching that movie going, can't imagine how hard it must be to edit one of these films. Genuinely, that thought. I was thinking of Marianne and Mary Jo, who edited that movie, and I was thinking, God, that Vatican scene, that's so detailed, like all the moving parts that are going on in that scene, and all the suspense and the timing of it all, and the way, all the composition of the shots is just so incredible. And then you've got one of the greatest Tom Cruise running scenes at the end when he's running through China, and then the way that Michelle has to. So much great stuff in that movie.
But not a great title sequence, or not really a title sequence.
No, not really. No, you're right. Not a great title sequence. No, you're right. And then the Brad Bird kind of CG version of the title sequence, traveling down the tunnel. Was again its own thing that worked great for that movie. But Chris, for Rogue Nation, he really wanted a callback to the first one, which you can tell it feels really similar in terms of the pace and the energy and the style, and what the designers, the term they used to describe the letters traveling behind is called a train. They say that the letters are a train going behind. But it's very similar to the first one. They did that with the train in the first one.
That was the first movie to bring in the black dossier folder from the old show.
Yeah, that was very specific. And you know what?
Whose idea was that?
Chris's idea, and we filmed it about 3 weeks before we finished. There was a day we had of pickups, and we did several things. We did. So when Ethan is locked in the record booth at the beginning and the gas comes out, there is a shot of the gas coming out near his feet, which looks like a straightforward shot of just gas coming out of a vent, but it's really hard to get a camera that low, a film camera that low. So they had to build a mini set, and we had a shot that was kind of, from a kind of higher angle looking down, but it wasn't as dynamic as we needed. So we went and built a mini set, and we got, I think even Tom came and like sat in the shot with his shoes in it because he's so passionate about it being him. And we did this shot where Chris wanted a proper push in towards the vent as the gas started coming out, just to make you sort of sit up and lean into that moment of like, oh shit, what's happened. So we did that, and we did the dossier, and I remember we filmed, we threw the dossier down and filmed it, and I went and they had edited the opening titles and done an amazing job, Filmograph. But then I had these dailies of the dossier, and Chris really wanted that in the movie as a nod to the series. And so I remember, this is literally, it might have even been like 10 days before we finished. We got those shots, and I just put them in the couple of spots where they are, and then sent the edit back to Filmograph and said, hey guys, what do you guys think of this? And they were like, this is awesome, we're going to put this in. So that's how that ended up in there. But it was, Chris just wanting to have a proper nod to the original series. That was why he did it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then the fire
Fallout has the fire.
Yeah,
spreading.
The fire. Yeah, that was. It was just a cool idea, I think, that Chris responded to, and of course it's very hard to they had this concept of it. Aaron and Seth at Filmograph had this concept of these flames. And they kept saying, everything's going to be burning, and the Paris is going to be burning, and the kind of edges of the screen and the cutouts of people, and they would do stills and show us, but it's very hard to explain the idea of the moving fire without seeing it, and it's very difficult to do as a motion graphic concept. And I remember they did like 2 seconds just to show us, and Chris was like, yeah, this is great. And originally the pace of the sequence was slower, and Chris was like, no, we really need this to be up to 11. Like the energy of the imagery in this sequence, the audience needs to kind of go, whoa. You need to sort of yank them out of the darkness that they've been in and give them this blast of imagery. And then Lorne's music, of course, was just nailed it. The way that there's this cool sound in the middle, which is like in the middle, which sounds like the helicopter. And we used that sparingly in the score, but if you listen right in the middle of that, there is this sound that really sounds like a helicopter, which we were like, that is so cool because it thematically ties in with everything that's coming up later.
We love the music, and we love Lorne now after meeting him. So
he's so funny. Amazingly talented. The score is incredible. Yeah. He actually mentioned in his interview that you had a knack for knowing when to employ the plot. Just the secondary loud.
That's true. We I'm just a nerd like you guys. I love it. I love it, and I love the plot theme. And I remember, and when you're editing the film, you're often I edit totally silent, and I'm imagining the music and the sound effects as I'm editing these scenes, even some of the dialogue scenes. What I tend to do is I throw them together, and then I turn the sound off, and I watch them. I just watch the rhythm of the cuts to see how the rhythm and how the emotion of the characters' faces and their eyes all feel. So you just kind of feel the rhythms of the scene without any sound, as a way of like testing it, as stress testing the scene, And so I would quite often be imagining the plot theme sometimes to myself and imagining how it would work in different places. But the way he uses it in the helicopter sequence is just off the scale. The scene where Ethan is flying above Walker's helicopter with the payload, and it just goes bam 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 bam. You're like bam 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 bam. You're just going, this is awesome. I remember we were very fortunate in our very first temp mix for our first preview. Edgar Wright came to watch the playback. Edgar Wright and his brother came, and he was geeking out over that stuff as well. He was loving it because he just loves the movies like we do, and he was really complimentary about the film. And he was like, guys, the film's awesome, it's just like 15 minutes too long. And it was. It's just that we hadn't had the time at that point to go through and really crunch it down. Right. But he was dead right, and so Chris and I took great heart from that. But it was just a case then of literally looking at every frame of the movie and asking if it deserved to be in the film or not, and crunching it slowly crunching it down until we had a version that was too short, which was worse. And at that point, that's not helping anymore. And then you just let it breathe out a little bit more, and then you're like, okay, everything is landing now. It's if you don't give enough time for the dramatic weight of scenes to land, like the scene where they come out of when they get off the boat and they go up and they're like getting into the old BMW and they open the garage doors and the traffic cop is there. You can't make that scene shorter because there's no suspense. You need all that moment of them like looking at each other and her looking at them, and then you're thinking, oh god, they got so close and now it's all gonna, oh no, what's gonna happen So we had shorter versions of that scene and it just wasn't as effective. So you have to have faith. And the scene where Ilsa is following Ethan through Paris, and it's just this moment that you get to spend with her as a character, with this beautiful music, and it's just, we had to have faith that it was gonna that and that's Chris's favourite scene in the movie, and he always imagined this scene of Ilsa following Ethan, and then he's leading her to a secret place so they can have a conversation, but it worked, and it's just a very lyrical, emotional moment in a film which is filled with them, but is why the film kind of works so well, I think, is because you've got this great balance of genuine emotion and characters you care about, and then you've got the intrigue and the drive and the mission gadgets and all that cool stuff that you also need,
You got a question about Ilsa?
Yeah, well, so you were talking about Ilsa and Ethan there in that sequence.
Yeah.
Their romance is so unique to me. It's been over 2 movies and they haven't kissed once.
Yeah.
And I heard, McQuarrie's talked about how there was a kiss that was cut out of Fallout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The romance is so effective, and so much of that is in the editing. I have of finding those moments of just looks between the two of them. This romance is so great, and yet they still haven't kissed. I'm curious to know if there was a kiss that was cut out of Rogue Nation ever, and also just talk about that romance and how to make that work.
In Rogue Nation, well, she does kiss him in Rogue Nation because
she?
When she revives him. Doesn't she when he's doesn't she kiss him then?
She's giving him mouth to mouth.
Is it mouth to mouth? No, or does she? Oh, maybe that was removed as well. No, there was a moment where she was so pleased that he was alive that did that not make it? Maybe we cut that out.
You watched it last night, right?
Okay. In that case, no, we may have cut it out. No, okay, maybe we did cut it out.
Watch it again.
No, because no, they did in. So there was a version of that scene where he comes to life and she's kind of so relieved that she's succeeded that she just leans in and gives him a kiss, and there's a moment where he looks at her and is like, what was that, and she knows what she's about to do as well, so it's kind of
because she double crosses
him and about to do it, but she doesn't want to because she's grown quite fond of him, I think, and has a lot of like mutual professional respect. But no, we must have cut that. Okay, so sorry, team. Yes, there was probably a scene where they did kiss there, and that was cut. No, that was cut. And then there was a scene. Obviously, there was a whole scene that we removed at the 11th hour and the 59th minute. I mean, this scene made it into. We had 4 test screenings. The last test screening, they tested it with the kiss in and without the kiss, and it was a 50-second scene. Made this film 50 seconds longer, but everyone is aware that 50 seconds. May not sound like much to you guys, but I promise you, when your bladder is straining, 50 seconds is a lot. And the audience, you can lose them so quickly. I have this way of describing when you're watching a movie is you have a needle in your head that goes into the green when you like it and goes down into the red when you're like, when you're kind of slightly checked out, the needle dips down to the red. And I'm conscious of through every second of the movie which way the needle is moving for the audience, and you have to keep it going into the green as much as possible. And when there's a scene where it was interesting, I'm trying to think what the audience was. This is for Fallout. Yeah, there was a scene which was basically from the top of the Tate. When Ethan stood on the top of the Tate Modern and the helicopter's flying away, and you have that enormous piece of music, and Lane and Walker have just escaped. There was a scene there where Benji and Luther and Ethan discuss, they discuss. They're trying to figure out like what the villains are going to do with the plutonium, and then Ilsa walks in and is very angry with Ethan for letting Lane get away. I think Chris will probably elaborate on this if you interview Chris McQuarrie. Yeah, there was a fight scene that was kind of a kind of a fight. It was kind of a dance. It worked. It was very powerful, and it was. But interestingly, it kind of made Ilsa slightly weaker in some ways, and in the end, the film. We didn't need the scene to make the film work, and ultimately, if a scene can go, it should go. Because the momentum of the film was affected. The drive at that point, you needed to kind of get to the third act, because the moment that they're driving to Kashmir and you're getting into New Zealand or Kashmir, you start to settle into the fact that the film's reached the climax, and that you're going to just be in for like a 20-minute roller coaster until the end of the movie. And so and the audience is just slightly on the back foot until they sense that the third act is happening, until they have the briefing about the Death Star and they have to drop the proton torpedoes. At that point you're like, okay, now I know the movie's ending. I'm excited for the end of the film, but up until that point the audience is like, where are we going with this, and haven't we had enough of Ethan and Ilsa? And so in the end we took it out, and I remember Chris leaning over to me in one of our final DCP checks. We saw the film in Dolby Vision in Dolby in London, an amazing screening room, but that's the best way to see and hear a film is Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. And he leaned over to me and said, "Yeah, I'm glad we took that out." And he was really torn for a long time. I mean, he spent a week agonizing, the maximum amount of time possible. We were literally like finishing the DI and the sound mix, and it was like the last day that he could make the decision. He said, "Okay, no, take it out. Let's do it without." But he'll elaborate on that if you talk to him.
We will.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
I wanted to. You're one of the only department heads that returned from Rogue Nation, and McQuarrie has talked a lot about.
Jake Myers was the producer on. He was also both on both films. Yeah,
well, there's very few people that carried over. So
that's true.
And McQuarrie talks about wanting this to feel like because each movie had a different director.
That's true.
Did that kind of ethos influence your editorial style? Did you have this in mind when you were doing it?
Yes, I was very conscious of it. I was very grateful to be asked back. It was an enormous privilege. Initially, right, the job of the editor is to ensure the story is told properly and economically and accurately. So you engage with the characters and you understand the story and the plot. It may seem like the most basic thing to say, but editing is purely about storytelling, and the story that you tell from the first second of the movie to the last second of the movie, with every image that you choose to show and how long you choose to show it. And so it's about a well-edited film is about telling a story well, right, basically. And the story in this case was a different story with a different DP and with a same cast, obviously, and a director who was slightly more comfortable with how he was choosing to film the scenes, with his lens choices and how he moved the camera and how he lit the sets. And then the editing was just about, it was about making it clear, making the geography clear and making the scenes suspenseful and exciting and funny and dramatic and engaging and making them feel paced right. That's really what it comes down to. It's about taking the material that's filmed and putting it together in the best possible way, so it feels right, and there isn't necessarily much point in imposing an editing style on a film. You need to let the material kind of dictate what's best, So for me, it's about looking at the material and responding to it and putting it together the best way that the material dictates. So I'm not sure really that there were many kind of editorial flourishes per se that I brought to it. Maybe in the the editing is about percussion, and about rhythm, and so maybe, I remember in the scene where we're intercutting at the end when Benji and Luther when Benji and Luther are defusing the bombs and Ethan's climbing up the rocks. I remember, there was a section there where I made all the shots 1 frame shorter so that the pace would accelerate to when they cut so that was a little thing, but then I remember maybe in the gun battle in the underground in London when they're in that kind of underground tunnel and the lights get cut off, and in the gun battle there's a lot of kind of editing rhythms there, which I suppose I kind of did on instinct.
And in the club, that's very rhythmic because you kind of cut with the strobe lights when he and Cavill are kind of looking at each other.
Yes, that is true. Yes, there is a little bit of that. But again, you're looking at the dailies and you're finding the best bits and finding interesting ways to juxtapose the images to give them life and to give them to disorientate you in the correct amount of way. So that's kind of what editing's about, really. It's so. I'm not sure that I was conscious of this idea that Chris wanted it to feel different, but the way it was filmed, Rob Hardy being the DP and Lorne doing the music, different costume designer, different production designer, it was all that contributed to the footage being different, which dictated a different way of putting it together, I suppose is how you would put it. I just want the film to work for the audience. I don't want to impose anything on it. I just want you to watch it and get lost in it. The way that when we watch a movie, we love to do that. When there's a great movie, you just want to get lost in it and get engaged in it, and just the time to fly by and not even to look at your watch. You just want to, and not have to be worried. You want to feel confident that the director is somebody who has control of the story and is holding your hand and guiding you through this world and is confident with what they're doing. I think that's the secret.
They definitely accomplished all that.
Yeah, it's great.
And you know what? Our interview with Eddie went so well and so long. We're going to just dice it up into 2. So we'll have the conclusion next week. But for Charles Hood, this is Drew Taylor. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.